Hey guys, so it's been a while. It's been a couple of months. The last video I did was in the middle of the event last year. I definitely in October. And you know, I tried to think of reasoning to explain it away why, you know, I didn't stay consistent with updates from the event. I didn't give a review after the event, anything like that. But it all just kind of turns into lame excuses, and I dropped the ball. I kind of just kept going and kept forgetting to record. So it's on me, but I wanted to take this year to kind of take this a little more seriously. I know I've been inconsistent for the last two events, so I wanted to really give it my all this time. And I had started and stopped a few videos that just kind of kept coming out forced, so wanted to wait for the right moment. And hey, Horror Night Nightmares on Twitter and Instagram released their version 1.0 speculation map for this year's event. So I thought nothing better to come back and start talking about, you know, what to look forward to. I mean, of course we have had the first announcement, which was Chucky, and it's already a really strong thing to start with. It's the Sci-Fi Channel show, and I actually started watching it. I know I keep saying that I'm going to watch the things that are going to be at the event, and I never do. So when I saw that announced, I was like, I committed and started watching it, and I'm enjoying it. But there's a lot more on the map to talk about. So I thought we could just hop in. I'll share my thoughts, opinions, what some things could be, how likely I think that they would be, because of course you totally care what my opinion is of how likely something would be there. And overall, just how excited I would be for the things that are on this version of the speculation map. Of course, and they even say it online, it's a speculation map. Nothing is confirmed aside from Chucky. So I thought this is the perfect thing for us to get back into it. So let's begin. All right, and here we have it. Speculation Map 1.0 for Halloween Horror Nights 32, brought to you by Horror Night Nightmares. So again, please show them your support. Give them a like on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, any form of social media you can think of, because they bring us these speculation maps every year, and it just makes the season leading up to official announcements a little more fun. It gives us something to talk about, and channels like this something to do, in the off season. And also, speaking of supporting, if you could like, comment, subscribe, share this video with anyone you could think of, I would greatly appreciate it. Again, I am definitely trying to take this a little more seriously this year. I want to be more consistent, and just any support along the way is greatly appreciated. So now, before we actually get into talking about what is on this speculation map, there are a few things floating around in the community that I want to just bring up, put on the table, and ideally even kind of talk them into existence, because these three rumors that are floating around are all things I personally would really like to see at the event. The first of those rumors is that there might be an 11th house. Now, I feel like that could be a challenge going into this year's event, just because there's so much construction happening. Right now, the entire kids zone is closed off, and traditionally there's two houses over that way, so it could make it a little difficult. The former Shrek 4D building, it's becoming a Minions ride now. will be open by the time Horror Nights comes around. So that's definitely a venue that could potentially house a house, I guess. But I'm interested to see how they would pull it off, or even if it does happen this year. I feel that the way the event is growing, it is something that will happen eventually. Just my opinion. But I feel like it's something we can see, if not this year, definitely next year. Knock on wood, fingers crossed for that. The next two rumors are about potential houses. One I figure we'll talk about now, the other I'm going to save for when we're going through the map itself. But the one I want to talk about right now is something actually very interesting, because the rumor is that it might be it. Based off the Stephen King book and the movies that came out a few years ago. It's something that I feel would definitely fit in perfectly with the event. It's a large property, and there's plenty of visuals that would work. I'm not sure if it's got any weight behind this rumor, but it's definitely something I would be interested to see, and just wanted to kind of throw it out there and maybe hopefully talk it into existence. But now let's get into talking about what is on this speculation map. So obviously we have 10 houses on the board, 5 scare zones, 2 shows, and the usual 6 rides and attractions that are open every year. And we're just going to start with the houses. And the first one, there's not a whole lot we need to talk about. It's Chucky. It's, like I said in the beginning, it's the only house that has been confirmed for this year's event. Again, it's based on the Sci-Fi Channel show. I personally just started watching it not too long ago, and I have been enjoying it. From what I've seen from everyone online, it's a good show throughout all the seasons. I believe they're on their 3rd season now, or at least wrapping it up. So not much to talk about there, but it's definitely, in my opinion, a strong first house to announce. Next on the list, we have Universal Monsters Phantom versus Dracula. Now, this house, I feel, if not this exact combination of monsters, I feel like we would see something kind of involving that universe. Just because this would be the 4th edition of this series of houses over the last couple of years. Obviously, we had Universal Monsters, we had The Bride of Frankenstein Lives, and last year we had Legends Collide. So it seems to be a well that they keep going back to, but it's always something fresh with these newer interpretations of the classic Universal monsters. So even if we don't see these two exactly, I feel like it's a safe assumption that we see the Universal monsters in some capacity. Now, third on this list, we have The Last of Us. And this, I feel, would be another slam dunk property for them to have. Not just because it's been something that the community has been wanting for a while now because of the popularity of the games, but also because of the series on HBO that is wrapping up, I believe, this week. I personally haven't watched it yet, but everything that I've seen online has been nothing but positive opinion. So I feel like just from the game and the success of the show, it would be a very popular house to have. And again, I feel like it would be a no-brainer. Now, our 4th house is our first original, and it's based on Krampus. Not a whole lot to say here other than I would be very into seeing what the creative team would do with the story of Krampus, but also I would love this house just because it would be very cold. And obviously, if you've ever been to this event, you know how hot it gets for the 2 months that it runs. So just being able to go into this house to cool down for a few minutes would be amazing. So I hope it happens just based on that. Now, the fifth house we're seeing on the map is actually possibly involving the third rumored house that I was talking about earlier. Now, when you look at the map, you only see an anchor. And obviously, the first thing you would think of would be a nautical house, maybe a sequel to last year's Dead Man's Pier, something like that. Now, based off of rumors coming out of Horror Night Nightmares, I know the guys at the Fear and Beer podcast were also talking about it a bit. I think that the anchor is a little bit of a swerve and potentially to kind of misdirect you unless you really think about it. I think this house could be based on the Invasion Scare Zone from 2017. Now, the official description of that scare zone from that year's event was, the year is 1955 and a UFO has crashed onto the wharf. Their goal? To conduct experiments upon you to prepare to invade Earth. Now, again, they crashed into the wharf. And I feel that it's potentially hinting at that scare zone getting its own house. The alien characters from that scare zone have also been featured a few times in these last few years. In last year's Hellblock Horror House, there was a character dressed as one of the aliens. And in the Lights Camera Action scare zone from 2 years ago, there was a stage setup for Invasion. So it's been kind of floating around in the event here and there these last few years. I know I'm really probably stretching with that logic. You know, the mental gymnastics are definitely there. But I'm kind of hoping that it would be, you know, a misdirection on the map. And it's something that we see. It's definitely a fun scare zone. The costumes were crazy, and getting to see them ramped up within a house setting, I feel would be even better. So keep my fingers crossed on that one. But let's move on to houses that we don't have to do crazy mental gymnastics to justify in our heads. We have another Horrors of Blumhouse house potentially on the board for this year. Last year's was Black Phone and Freaky, and I thought kind of having two IPs that might not necessarily have been able to carry a house by themselves merged together to be, you know, just one larger house with the two of them in it was a good move. And for this year, we could see Megan and Insidious. Now, obviously, Megan has been in theaters and has received pretty solid reviews. A lot of the community doesn't see how it could be a house by itself, so definitely seeing the possibilities here for it to be kind of shortened, you know, just the best of, and then moving on into Insidious. And of course, there is a newer Insidious movie coming out this year, I believe in July. So we'll more than likely see that version of the franchise. So it could be fun. I hadn't seen Megan, and Insidious has never been my favorite franchise, but the appeal is definitely there for the rest of the community, so I could see it being a strong choice. Moving along to our next house, we have another original, and that is Lair of the Banshees. Now, this would be another house that's based on what was originally a scare zone.
This was at, I believe, Horror Nights 26 in 2016. It was in that New York area, and the official description of it was evil spirits and horrific creatures roam free in this dark hollow deep in the forest. Now, I feel like that would definitely be a cool environment to see, you know, being in the forest with all these monsters and spirits chasing you definitely has its appeal as well. I think it would be fun. You can go and see the scare actors and what they look like for the scare zone and just also imagine, how much more they could do with them in the house setting. Now, coming down to these last three houses, we have one more that could be potentially based on something that already exists within the Halloween Horror Nights history, and that's Devil Dogs. Now, Devil Dogs was one of the featured movies within the Slaughter Cinema House at HHN 28 in 2018. And basically, it's biker werewolves. And that was a house I didn't get to go through many times, but that section in particular was definitely something that I thought was fun. It's definitely a unique idea, and I just think it would be a fun house to see. I mean, come on, it's biker werewolves. It would be cheesy. It would have some pretty solid scares, I think, and I think it could be a fun time. There's not really much else you could say about it, but it getting its own house seems like a no-brainer to me. Next up, we do have another potential musician house. Now, I will be the first to admit, last year I had talked up the Weekend house as potentially being the greatest house that the event has ever seen, just based on, the popularity of the Weekend. For me, it wasn't my favorite. I will definitely admit that. It was a fun time, but it wasn't something that I wanted to go through every time I was there. So, that being said, another musician house I'm sure will have its appeal and definitely continue to bring in more kind of casual fans to the event just to continue to feed more money and kind of help it grow, which is always something I'd be happy to see. Just by seeing a guitar, potentially a heavy metal band, there's a lot of bands that the community have thrown out there that could fit the bill. So we'll wait and see. It's totally up in the air what it could be, but it will definitely be interesting if it actually happens. And this brings us to our last house on the map. It's another original, and according to a quick Google Translate, this says good luck in Japanese. So, not a whole lot to work with there, to speculate on, but it's something that I definitely would like to keep an eye on and see how it kind of progresses as these speculation maps go through future versions. And that wraps up what we have to really talk about on this map. Obviously, we can't really talk too much about the scare zones. There's nothing for us to work there just because they're all unknown. Two shows, obviously there would be a Lagoon show, and Nightmare Fuel seems like it's here to stay. Obviously, my opinion is that Nightmare Fuel, it's not for me, but it definitely has its appeal. So I'm glad that that's continued to be featured and give something for people to watch.
And there we have it. That is Speculation Map 1.0 for 2023. And again, I think it's going to be a solid year. We could see everything from that map or nothing aside from Chucky. And again, I just want to approach it with a positive mindset. And to add on to that, I promise you that I'm going to stay consistent this time around. I want to, kind of finally get around to working on a few videos I've had ideas for. And actually, now that I have an annual pass, it makes it a lot easier. But, I want to, again, follow through with my resolution to be consistent with this. And actually, part of that is I've been working sort of on a backdrop to use for future videos, because for the last 2 years they've come from different places: a barn, the front seat of my car, a plain wall, or the parks. But I wanted to finally have something consistent. So, going to be adding things to the wall, just so when more announcements come through, you're not just looking at me sitting in a car or something. But that's it for this time around. I promise I'll see you guys soon. But until then, stay groovy. It's a good time.